Karl Marx is one of those names that you cannot ignore. For some, he is a visionary who exposed the hidden chains of capitalism. For others, he is a dangerous thinker whose ideas fueled revolutions, unrest, and regimes that turned brutal. But regardless of where one stands, Karl Marx remains a towering figure in human thought. His writings shook the foundations of the 19th century, echoed through the revolutions of the 20th century, and continue to shape debates about inequality, power, and the future of society in the 21st century. To understand Marx is not merely to study a philosopher, it is to examine a lens through which entire generations have interpreted history, economics, and justice. His philosophy of revolution is not simply about overthrowing governments. It is about asking deeper questions: who owns the wealth of society, who benefits from labor, and whether freedom is possible in a system built on exploitation. Karl Marx was born in 1818 in Trier, in what was then Prussia. He came from a middle-class family and was educated in philosophy, law, and history. Like many intellectuals of his time, he was inspired by the ideas of German philosophers such as Hegel. But unlike most who studied philosophy as a way of interpreting the world, Marx took a radically different approach. He believed that philosophy must not only interpret the world but also change it. This idea would become the seed of his revolutionary thinking. For Marx, thought and action were inseparable. To know injustice was to be compelled to fight against it. To analyze society without attempting to transform it was, in his view, a betrayal of philosophy itself. At the heart of Marx's philosophy lies his theory of history, often called historical materialism. In simple terms, Marx argued that the driving force of history is not the ideas of great men or the decisions of kings but the struggle between different classes of people. Throughout history, there has always been an oppressor and an oppressed, the master and the slave, the lord and the serf, the capitalist and the worker. This tension, Marx argued, is the engine of social change. Just as the fall of feudalism gave rise to capitalism, Marx believed that capitalism itself contained the seeds of its own destruction. The contradictions within it, its tendency to enrich a few while impoverishing many, its obsession with profit over human needs, its transformation of human labor into a commodity, would eventually lead to crisis and revolution. To understand this, we need to look at Marx's analysis of capitalism. For Marx, capitalism was not simply an economic system. It was a total social order that shaped how people lived, worked, and thought. Capitalism transformed human relationships into transactions. It took the simple act of labor, our creative, human ability to shape the world, and turned it into a commodity to be bought and sold. Workers, under capitalism, were alienated in several ways. They were alienated from the products they made, since what they created belonged to the capitalist who sold it. They were alienated from the process of labor itself, since work became repetitive and mechanical rather than creative and fulfilling. They were alienated from their fellow human beings, since competition and profit turned people into rivals. And ultimately, they were alienated from themselves, from their own human essence, because their lives were dictated by forces outside their control. This concept of alienation remains one of Marx's most powerful insights. Even today, in a world of digital technology, office jobs, and gig work, many people feel this sense of estrangement. You work for hours creating something you may never see, for a company that does not recognize you, for pay that is barely enough to survive, while someone else reaps the majority of the profit. The frustration, the burnout, the quiet despair of modern workers echoes Marx's warnings from nearly 2 centuries ago. He argued that this alienation was not accidental but a built-in feature of capitalism. The system thrives by extracting surplus value, the difference between what a worker is paid and the profit the capitalist makes from their labor. This exploitation, Marx insisted, is the foundation of capitalist wealth. But Marx did not merely describe capitalism, he predicted its trajectory. He saw that capitalism was extraordinarily dynamic. It would expand across the globe, tearing down old traditions, spreading markets, and revolutionizing technology. But in doing so, it would also sow instability. He observed that capitalism runs on cycles of boom and bust. Periods of growth are inevitably followed by crises, overproduction, unemployment, and financial collapse. Sound familiar? From the Great Depression of the 1930s to the financial crash of 2008, Marx's predictions about the volatility of capitalism have proven remarkably accurate. Every crisis exposes the fragility of the system and raises questions about who bears the cost, the wealthy elite or the working majority. Of course, Marx was not content to simply critique capitalism. His philosophy was revolutionary. He envisioned a world where the working class, the proletariat, would eventually rise up against the capitalist class, the bourgeoisie. This revolution, unlike past revolutions, would not merely replace one ruling class with another. It would abolish class itself. In Marx's vision, the means of production, the factories, the land, the resources, the tools of labor, would no longer be privately owned by a few but collectively owned by all. In such a society, exploitation would end, and human beings would be free to develop their capacities without the chains of economic necessity. This was the dream of communism, famously declared in the Communist Manifesto of 1848, which Marx co-wrote with Friedrich Engels. The manifesto begins with the unforgettable words, "A spectre is haunting Europe, the spectre of communism." It was not just a call to arms but a diagnosis of the age. Industrialization was transforming Europe. Cities were swelling with factory workers. Inequality was widening. Monarchies and aristocracies were losing power to new capitalist elites. Marx and Engels saw in this turmoil the potential for a new order, born out of struggle. They urged workers of the world to unite, for they had nothing to lose but their chains. Now, it is important to recognize that Marx did not live to see his ideas fully realized. He spent much of his life in poverty, moving between countries, often exiled for his radical views. He wrote extensively, producing massive works like Das Kapital, where he analyzed the mechanics of capitalism in painstaking detail. But the revolutions of his lifetime were partial, incomplete, or crushed. It was only after his death that Marx's ideas would inspire major political movements, from the Russian Revolution of 1917 to countless struggles in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Here lies the paradox of Marx. His ideas were meant to liberate humanity, to end exploitation and alienation. Yet many regimes that claimed his legacy turned authoritarian, oppressive, and violent. Stalin's Soviet Union, Mao's China, and other Marxist states often betrayed the humanistic spirit of Marx's philosophy. Instead of creating a free society, they built systems of control, censorship, and terror. Critics point to this as proof that Marxism is inherently flawed. Supporters argue that these distortions were betrayals, not fulfillments, of Marx's vision. The debate continues, unresolved, but the fact remains Marx's philosophy unleashed forces that reshaped the modern world. But why, after all these years, should we still listen to Marx? The answer lies in the questions he raised. When we look at our world today, we see staggering levels of inequality. The richest 1% own more wealth than the bottom half of humanity. Gig workers struggle for survival while tech billionaires build rockets to escape the planet. Factories still exploit workers in developing countries, producing cheap goods for wealthier consumers. Housing crises push families into debt while corporations buy up entire neighborhoods. Even our data, our clicks, our preferences, our time online have become commodities sold for profit. In all of this, we can hear Marx's voice, asking who benefits and who pays the price. Moreover, Marx forces us to confront the meaning of freedom. In liberal democracies, we are told that we are free because we can vote, speak, and choose. But Marx would ask, are you truly free if your survival depends on selling your labor under conditions you cannot control? Are you free if your entire day is dictated by the need to earn a wage? Are you free if economic structures limit your choices at every turn? Marx believed that true freedom is not simply political but economic, the freedom to live a life shaped by your own needs and desires, not by the demands of profit. Even issues like climate change echo Marx's analysis. Capitalism, driven by endless growth and profit, consumes the planet's resources at unsustainable rates. Forests are cut, oceans polluted, air poisoned, all in the pursuit of profit. Marx predicted that capitalism treats nature as something to exploit without limits, and today we face the consequences of that exploitation. The climate crisis, in many ways, is the ultimate expression of the contradictions Marx warned about. The pursuit of private profit has put the survival of humanity itself at risk. And yet, Marx was not a prophet of despair. His belief in revolution was ultimately rooted in hope. He saw in the working class the potential to build a more just society, not based on exploitation but on cooperation. He imagined a future where the free development of each individual would be the condition for the free development of all. Whether or not one agrees with his methods, his vision of a world without oppression continues to inspire. Understanding Karl Marx, then, is not about adopting his ideology blindly. It is about engaging with the questions he raised, questions that remain urgent today. How do we balance profit with human dignity? How do we ensure that technology serves people rather than enslaves them? How do we create a society where freedom is more than just a word but a lived reality? These questions demand reflection, and in wrestling with them, we keep Marx's spirit alive. As we look back on his philosophy of revolution, we see a thinker who challenged us to strip away illusions, to see the world as it truly is. He asked us to recognize exploitation where it hides, to resist systems that reduce people to tools, and to believe that change is not only possible but necessary. Whether one views him as a hero or a villain, Karl Marx cannot be ignored. His ideas remain a mirror held up to society, reflecting both its achievements and its failures, both its progress and its injustices. In the end, Marx's philosophy of revolution is not just about overthrowing governments. It is about a deeper transformation of how we live, how we work, and how we relate to one another. It is about asking, always, whether the world we have is the world we want, and if not, what we are willing to do to change it. That question, perhaps more than any doctrine or manifesto, is Marx's enduring legacy.